Hello, my name is John Mayer, and I'm the Executive Director of CALI, the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction. The video you are about to watch is from the annual CALI conference held at the University of Michigan School of Law in Ann Arbor, Michigan on June 4th and 5th, 2026. Most U.S. law schools are members of CALI. CALI publishes over 1,400 interactive tutorials that teach the law to law students. Faculty can also use LessonLink to create formative assessments using CALI lessons. CALI publishes casebooks by paying law faculty to write and review books that can be adopted in many courses in law school. These books are free to download from our website, or print versions can be purchased at near cost. You can download the PDFs or even the Microsoft Word versions of most of our books and add your own commentary before distributing to your students. $300 casebooks are a thing of the past, and adopting one book from CALI saves you more than your entire institutional membership. If you would like to learn more, email me at jmayer@cali.org. I would be happy to visit or zoom into your school to talk about CALI.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the day. Thank you all for coming. I'm sure the temptation to sneak back to the hotel and catch a quick nap before dinner was very strong, so thanks for coming. My name is Dan Quiggin. I am the data analytics nerd, or Dan for short, at the GSU College of Law Library. I'm the interim director of GSU's Legal Analytics and Innovation Initiative, which seeks to train lawyers in both data analytics and legal technology. You might think, with such a title and an acronym that includes AI in it, in my organization, that I would be here to talk about AI. I am not here to talk about AI. Quick show of hands, how many people showed up at this talk specifically because it wasn't talking about AI? That amuses me. No, I'm going to do one of my pet soapbox topics and talk about what I consider to be the most underrated coding language, namely Visual Basic for Applications. So question, do we have any VBA users in the house? Wonderful. So I want to make a quick note before I begin. Not best, most underrated. Now, I'm actually comparative lightweight in terms of hardcore VBA users, but I've been using it since I was 17, and and I say it's pretty good. But even the most hardcore VBA aficionados will admit its limitations. It's still very useful, and I think that it's underlearned compared to how much utility it can give, and it has a lot of other advantages. In other words, I'm going to make the case that it's worth learning Visual Basic for Applications, even if you already know other better languages. So with that in mind, what exactly is VBA? So Visual Basic for Applications, it's the coding language native to the Microsoft Office suite. So it's primarily used within Excel. I'm going to do a few demonstrations later in the talk. It can also be used in Word and PowerPoint. So what it allows us to do is use the sort of scripts which we are familiar with in other coding languages. Quick question, who here does coding, significant coding? Okay, so you guys know what for loops are, that sort of thing. What it allows us to do is gives Excel users access to things like for and while loops and more enriched if statements. Excel does have if. VBA can do things like select case, in which you can choose from a number of different outcomes and execute a different thing without having to write one of those clumsy ifs statements. So what does it do? It allows us to edit the value of Excel cells in place in a way that can be done quickly and repeatedly. So you can also perform Excel's native functions iteratively, automatically, and conditionally. What I mean by this? Iteratively, we can do it in a for loop. And conditionally, we can do it if certain conditions are met. So if such and such a thing is true, we can execute this chunk of code. Otherwise, we can do this. Main advantage of it, I think, is that VBA allows us to stack several functions at once in ways that might otherwise get excessively clunky. I don't know if anyone here uses Excel all that much, but if you want to have something that's dependent, if you want to have an output of a cell be dependent on several different contingencies, this can get very messy very fast, having to have multiple nested if and statements or statements. it can get real confusing real fast. VBA allows us to nest all of those into one function that can identify each of the things. So it's useful in that regard. Now, I saw that a few of you did do coding, and I'm going to address what you're probably thinking, and that is, I can do all this in Python. It's like, yes, you can do all this in Python. However, one of the big advantages of VBA is it doesn't require any external installations. It's native to Excel. If you have anyone who's untrustful of technology, somebody who's like a senior partner at a law firm who still longs for the days of electro writers. Anyone used an electro writer recently? We tried to get rid of one like a lot. We tried to get rid of one last week, and one of our people wouldn't let us get rid of it. So, and the way I describe it, try getting somebody who still goes on about WordPerfect to install Anaconda on their device. I mean, it's a big install, takes up a lot of space, and they're suddenly curious about why you're having to open code and go and open up the terminal, go pip install pandas. My cat's name is Pip, so that's particularly funny to me. But if you're using VBA, you don't have to do any additional installations. It's just all there to begin with. And it does everything it needs to do without requiring any sort of external packages. So what do I mean by this? So leaving aside things like Solver, which is useful for complex equations. Don't know how much those come up in legal practice, but they do come up in other fields. These can be a pain to install, even for experienced coders. Has anyone here ever worked with Poplar? It's a Python package that does optical character recognition. It is notoriously a nightmare to work with. My students, when we do our OCR workshop, I usually have to bank in about half an hour to figure out how to install Poplar, because it's not. Sorry if the owner of Poplar is listening, but your software is not well documented. You have to do one of two things. Either you have to install Python and all the relevant packages onto the person's computer, then open up your Jupyter script and run it, or you have to package an app and watch Cylance or whatever your antivirus protection software is throw a tantrum. In which case you generally need to get IT involved. With that said, a lot of people do have at least a passing familiarity with Excel. If they're not going to react the same way to being asked to open up Excel and click the big friendly button that you can use with VBA, Excel is something that everyone's at least passingly familiar with. A lot of people are more afraid of Excel than I had realized. But the way I see it, and this is part of the reason I think VBA is underrated. VBA is how you get the most out of Excel. And no matter how tech-averse the organization, no matter how much people dislike programming, every organization everywhere has the spreadsheet, some form of spreadsheet or another. For example, at the GSU College of Law, we have a grade curving spreadsheet. I'm going to be demoing that later. It's good enough that Michelle kept using it even when she went to Mercer. And my view is that if you Excel's everywhere, and if you can establish a reputation as the Excel guru, it can be, well, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, people come to you with every Excel problem conceivable. But if you're like me and have a mug that's the Excel interface and, ooh, this calls for a spreadsheet, that's a happy thing for you. So, yeah, the way I see it, the big advantage of VBA is it doesn't require any external installations, and it's everywhere. And it's one of those things where if you can figure out how the spreadsheet works, if you're the person who knows how the spreadsheet works and can make improvements to it, it can improve your staying power. That said, if you were in the room at the start of this talk, before the talk started, you were probably observing my little run-in with IT trying to get macros enabled. There are a lot of protections against macros and the like, particularly if it's a file that you didn't create on your computer. So I downloaded mine from Dropbox. This is a residual fear from the early days of the software and some of the phishing scams that happened. I'm going to talk about one of the bigger ones just quickly, the Melissa virus. So the Melissa virus was in 1999. A guy named David L. Smith, aka Quiggin, uploaded a Word document to an AOL news group and claimed that it contained free login passwords to adult websites. It was like codes.doc. A surprising number of people downloaded this document and opened it. Social engineering, I guess, was a thing back in 1999, if they didn't call it that. And when they did this, a hidden VBA macro executed in the background. It lowered the security settings for the Microsoft Office suite generally and hijacked Microsoft Outlook. It sent an email to the first 50 comments on the list with a subject line, something like this. Here is that document you asked for. Don't show anyone else. Winky face. Once a file was infected, it would paste the following into any infected Word document opened when the current minute matched the day of the month. So, for example, for today, it's June 4th. So if you open something at 4:04, say, or 5:04 p.m., it would activate this line. It would paste into your Word document 22 points plus triple word score plus 50 points for using all my letters. Game over. Game's over. I'm out of here. Anyone recognize that reference? Well, yes, but I showed it to you at breakfast. Now, one of the reasons that we're so shy about this is Melissa actually did quite a bit of damage, about $80 million worth of damage. With that said, I mean, it was kind of just a juvenile prank, wasn't actually doing any sort of substantial phishing, wasn't trying to get passwords, wasn't trying to get banking data, really just demonstrating vulnerabilities and trolling for the sake of trolling. I think the guy got like 6 months in prison for it. For my own part, I think the greater damage was it caused Microsoft to clamp down on VBA. So there's sort of this residual fear of macros, harmful macros that didn't originate on your device that people, they worry that it's going to cause another Melissa incident. I'm telling you about this Melissa story for two reasons. One, I think a latent aversion to VBA based on incidents like Melissa from the early days of the internet has led to the underuse of VBA and thus to its underrating. I think if it hadn't been for Melissa or similar incidents, I think we would have seen more uptake of VBA, and I think we would have had more people learn it, and I think it really is quite a valuable coding language. It also gives me, but also talking about Melissa gives me a chance to show this clip, because you might be wondering, that's a very specific thing to post. So it gives me an excuse to show this clip. You know, not the ad. I suppose internet humor has always been referential. So that's a sort of history of VBA and sort of the initial thing for what it is and why I think it's underused. Okay, I've made the case for why it might not be used as much as it could be. So what are the uses of it? I'm going to go through some examples based on my own work at the College of Law. So one of the first VBA projects that I worked on was a grade curving spreadsheet. So GSU applies a grading curve like I think every law school does. Is it actually required by the ABA, or is it just sort of a custom? Well,
everybody's worried about grading inflation, so everybody's putting grading curve.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Don't get me started on grading curves generally, but the point is that in order to do them, there's a few different ways you can do it. You can either do something like a distribution box. To really do it, I think, properly requires at least a basic understanding of probability theory. So being able to calculate z-scores and the like. Now, what's my next? So I want to quickly, I'm going to quickly hold out here and show you my grading spreadsheet. So this is, let me zoom out. So what we're going to eventually do is get to this thing here. So what we do is we're going to calculate we're going to enter names and raw scores, and that's going to make an adjustment based on either a curve or a scale. What it adjusts to is going to be based on the required course. And since this is a demo, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the proverbial lights. So let me unmask everything that's currently hidden. And unhide. So you can see here we've got our z-score, we've got our mean, we've got our standard deviation. All of this is ordinarily hidden because I don't necessarily think it helps the standard user. What I'm going to do now, though, is show you how it actually works. So I'm going to start by one of the more useful features. So question, who here uses iCollege or something similar for grades? This is basically a class management thing. So I'm going to load in the iCollege data. So this is from my managerial economics class. The grades are real, the students are not. I've used anonymous data. Worry not. I got the memo at the beginning of the conference. So you can see here that we've run our first macro. And again, this is using a big friendly button rather than having to go into the developer tab and run the code ourselves. So data imported successfully into iCollege grade import. I would like to import student names. I would like to import student grades. We import the names and grades. I'm going to go sortable by last name. I have not already added up my grades in iCollege. And I'm going to take the machine up on its kind offer to add up total scores for me. It adds them up, and it's done. So here we have our thing. I should have shown this to be blank before, but it's loaded in from this document here. And again, you can see that these this is the direct export from iCollege, just with fake names. So we have our data, and you see that we've loaded it in, zooming out, so going here. We have our student names. We don't have our exam numbers. And we've loaded in our raw scores. So these are our raw scores, and these are our adjusted scores. Now, this is determined by our z-score. So for those of you who don't know what a z-score is, this is used in shifting around a probability distribution curve. So it measures how many standard deviations away a score is from the mean. So in this case, we have our students generated a raw mean of just shy of 78. Now, if we had our score at 78, it would not meet our GPA requirements. So we adjust our mean upwards to 85. So you can see here, this student goes from a C plus to a B. This student goes from a B to a B plus. We've also got a student here who's failing. You'll notice that this cell is blank. This is because GSU's GPA calculation requirement excludes failing students from the overall average GPA. We also exclude from even the curve calculation exchange students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here, and you can see that this removes our LLM student from having an adjustment. Again, this is in keeping with GSU's policy that the curve does not apply to LLM students. Oh my goodness, I am sorry for anyone on the Zoom. I have not been sharing my screen. Hopefully you've been able to follow on at least a little from what I've been doing. I don't know if anyone's actually on Zoom, but, well, for the recording, I suppose. Now, see here that this tells us whether we've met our our GPA requirements. You can see, so 3.11 for a required course, it needs to be 3.1. This is a slight adjustment on our part. We can tighten. You can see that if we tighten the curve, what that does is it reduces our standard deviation, makes our actual bell curve here a little bit tighter, and with these few little perturbations gets us into our required range. So all of this is happening on the back end. Move this out of the way. Now, what's going on the back end here is the developer tab, something which you have to manually enable in Excel. You can see this is our importer. It can calculate your scores. It can import your names. And what we're doing with the grade adjuster, wherever it is, all we're doing with to adjust the curve is incrementing that value by 0.5. So I'm going to go back to the presentation here. Before I do, questions, comments, concerns? So full disclosure here, I actually originally had a much fancier version with more bells and whistles. Forgetting the wisdom of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. That said, Excel does have, so this, I actually count this as one of the big advantages of Visual Basic versus other coding languages, in the sense that Excel's native functionality can do a lot of the heavy lifting. So going to the spreadsheet, if you look at, for example, our z-score calculator, this is done using an Excel formula. Our letter grades are looked up using Excel's XLOOKUP formula. So what that does is it reads in our adjusted score, looks it up in this table over here, so it finds what's the closest to this value here, and then returns this corresponding value of the grades. So similarly, same thing here. And again, this adjusted score. We can see here that we have the curve. This is how it's calculated, and then we also have scale, which is what I do with the scale is I set the maximum grade to 100, and everyone else gets scaled relative to that. Good way of doing it if you don't want to do a curve. But you can see that Excel's native functionality is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. But what VBA allows us to do, one is import all of these scores from a different worksheet, and then if we know the sort of structural form, allows us to extract names and scores. So let me show you once again the name import. So one of the things that we'll do is import college names. Sorry, just give me a second. Been a while since I've looked at this one. Import our college names. Well, here it is. So you can see that it'll look for it looks for a column labeled first name and identifies that as the first name column. It looks for a column labeled last name and identifies that as the last name column. This accounts for the idea that you could have different positions of those cells in the spreadsheet. So as I said, I count this as a pretty significant advantage that VBA has over other coding languages. Again, you can see that it doesn't require all the code can happen on the back end. I was able to do everything we wanted the spreadsheet to do without opening up the developer tab, without opening up the code, without having to run the code from the back end. Do everything with big friendly buttons and use Excel to supplement the rest. So for me, that's a pretty big advantage. Other program I wanted to look on is our Director of Student Life was looking at student accommodations. He wanted to send emails to students with their modified exam schedule, so these being accounting for accommodations. There were some difficulties though. As I will show you, the file had one line per accommodated exam. So each student had, if they had three accommodated exams, each student would have 3 lines. We wanted it to be 1 line per student so that we wouldn't have to send the students 3 separate emails with their exams. It would allow us to use mail merge. Students wouldn't get multiple emails. Now, unfortunately, the solution might be, well, if everyone has the same number of accommodations, accommodated exams, let's just get groups of 4. Couldn't do that. Some students had 2, some students had 3, so couldn't use any sort of smart grouping there. So what we had to do instead, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. So we started with this. So as you see, we have IDs, we have this, so I think we have a group somewhere. So you can see 2663315 shows up a few times. At some point there's a double. We also clustered it by students. Again, you can see this problem that you have 3 accommodations here, 4 accommodations here, 2 here, 2 here, and so on. So in order to, now I can't actually run the macros here, but in this case I don't have to. You might notice a conspicuous lack of buttons. That's because halfway through developing this, I realized that I only actually needed to do this once. This isn't something where I have multiple users. This is me coordinating with our director of student life. So I could just do a fairly messy VBA hardcode. So not that one. So you can see here that because this doesn't have to be portable, because we know exactly what the data structure is going to look like every time, it's crude, but we were just able to hard code everything. And so we're able to, what this is effectively doing is we start with j equals 1, so we're iterating. Oh, that's a test, hang on. Did I really just run test? So I equals 1 to 225, that's our total number of students. So we go through, offset is the useful tool for VBA. So what this is saying is we start in cell A1 and we offset by I. And so the I goes through a for loop. We run it for each I each time. If worksheets equals student number, so we load in our current student number. And then what that's telling us is that we want to fill in these. So course names equals course names and new line and worksheets I1.offset value. So I, you can see this is the course name. What this is basically doing, what this is basically doing is saying if this is the same student as we're currently working with, then add a new line and add these new courses. So course names equals this and this. So we're adding in a list of course names, instructors, exam dates, and so on. Otherwise, we reset and we restart. So what does our output end up looking like? So you can see here we start out with first and last names, and tell me I remember to, yes, I did delete the student names. Excellent. So you see that this person has accommodations in health law, constitutional tort litigation, and con law 2. This is 3 separate lines. What we wanted was to get it looking like this, because this way we only need to send the mail, we only need to do the mail merge once for this ID. There were names in here, but we got rid of the names for, privacy reasons. Shouldn't show those student emails. Ignore that. Knew I forgot something. Now, well, is it possible to do this in Python? Probably, but you can do it in VBA. And I think it's actually a little easier in VBA, especially when you consider the initial processing we had to do to get it to by student. So I've mentioned that VBA is mostly used in Excel. it does have applications in Word. I've not used it in PowerPoint much, but I do want to share a couple of Word projects that are worth mentioning. So the first is what's called the printer. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I'm not going to use this one, if nothing else, because macros are apparently blocked for it. But what this does is we print out, if you print out this document, I wonder if I can open the macros. Can I open it? Here we go. Well, thought that'd work. But this is a useful little document that I don't think you actually can do in Python. What it does is you print out one page with the settings you want, so double-sided and stapled a lot of the time. Run this macro, and if you push this button on a computer that trusts your macro, and then enter in a directory, it will print out, double-sided and stapled, every file in that directory. You can see why this would be useful if you have a very large class, a required class. You don't want to have to open, print, open, print, open, print 60 times. So having something that can script, iterate over your folders and print out. Python can sort of do this, but it can only print out without going double-sided and stapling. It goes to the default print setting, whatever that is. So I think that's a pretty strong point for VBA. Again, so loads every file in the directory, and I don't actually think this is something that can be done in Python. Somebody who knows more about Python can probably correct me on that. And the last one I want to talk about is one that didn't work. So I call this the Garbler. It's an attempt at an anti-AI measure. My objective was simple: create a document that is readable by humans but not machines. So how this works, I'm just going to go ahead and show this to you. So, are you not going to cooperate with me? Okay, we'll just go ahead and run it. So we run. I'm going to go ahead. So this is I'll open that first. So this is a homework assignment from my MBA class. So you can see here, it's this is readable by an AI. Let me show you what happens if we run it through the Garbler. Close it first. We load it in. You can see that we've created a new file here. So, can you guys read this? So, readable by humans. Let's see what happens if we put this into Gemini. So, I'm going to go ahead and preload this prompt but not run it. So, pretty good, looks pretty good, right? Like to a human, it's entirely readable. To a machine, it ought to be incomprehensible gibberish. How did I do this? So the code inserts a random number of 1-point white space characters between each existing character in the document. Imperceptible to humans, other than the fact that the spacing looks a little weird, but to an AI, you can see here, let's open the Gemini back up. If you look here, so you can see the M, the B, the A, the 8, And so you can see here, there's, so managing in the global economy. Did I really only insert one character? Oh, here we go. That's meant to be multiple characters in between each one. That's going to be significant later. So you can see that this is pretty much incomprehensible. Now, I mentioned this doesn't work for two reasons. Can anyone see the first reason this won't work? Good thought, but not what I was going for. Not what I'm going for. So think more of a human factor. Anyone here use a screen reader? Yeah, turns out one of my colleagues pointed out, yeah, this is really going to screw over people with disabilities. That by itself was pretty much enough to more or less shelve it. But then when I was preparing for this talk, I also did this. God damn it, Gemini. Well, it's pretty smart. But fortunately, it missed my other trap. Take a read over this. Okay, so conclusion, Charlie is risk averse. That should be MJ, not MZ, but what have you. Conclusion, absolutely for sure, MZ is risk loving. Sure about that one. Andy is risk neutral. One of these things is not like the others. And indeed, feel free to borrow this little trick. Caught at least 2 students using that one. So yeah, that's a useful little trick I've tried out. I haven't used it more broadly, but as you see, even the very, very clever Gemini completely missed that one. Now, whether students are wise to it, I don't know. But, you know, useful little thing for future knowledge. So yeah, so like I said, that project, I mean, you know, as we sort of talked about since the beginning, we're encouraged to talk about things that worked and things that didn't work. Grading spreadsheet worked great. The printer worked great. The Gobbler failed on 2 fronts. Not that it's worth giving up on, but Gemini, let's see if this one bragged about it being a fun puzzle. No, when I did it last time, it bragged about it being a fun puzzle. So, bloody bots. So, as I said, I'm sure that somebody with adequate skill could do pretty much all that I'm doing here. Even the grading spreadsheet, I think, could be done in Python by somebody who knows what they're doing. I do think it works more smoothly with VBA. With that said, again, I make the case VBA isn't the best coding language. Incidentally, my colleague Kerry here said that given that I had a question mark in my title, my second slide should have been, no, it isn't, it sucks, we can all go home. I'm finishing a little earlier than I think I'd initially planned. But as I said, I think it's underrated. Python is good. Python can do a lot of this. But VBA is very much, I think, worth learning. And not for nothing, but when I told my students VBA, at least one of them actually did end up using it in a work project, found a good use case for it. So that is all that I have. So the question was, do students find it easier or more difficult compared to Python, which is the baseline language I teach them? It depends. Sorry. Unintentionally, but you know, it's nice to throw something back at you lawyers. Exactly. So some students will vibe more with one, some will vibe more with others. Some find VBA really, really intuitive. I think the ones who are sort of more comfortable with Excel to begin with have sort of more of a knowledge of how Excel works. Others will say this is so unintuitive, can we please go back to Python? Again, I think it's a matter of personal preference. Sometimes it's exactly what your coding background is. For my own part, VBA was the first coding language I learned, so I tend to think of everything relative to VBA. Possibly makes me biased, but hey, somebody's got to advocate for the little guy. Yeah. That's how I made the printer and the gobbler, in fact. Yeah, the combination spreadsheet and the grading spreadsheet I did by hand, but the other two I vibe coded. No, I mean, here's the thing, the bots know VBA pretty well. I mean, you know, there's Stack Exchange exists for VBA, much like anywhere else, and there's a lot of people who really do work extensively in this. So yeah, very much possible to vibe code. I think it helps to sort of have a more, it helps to know it mainly just because, well, one, you need to know it's there in order to even think to vibe code it. It's also useful to have to know at least the basics of it, just because, and I say this with vibe coding generally, you get more out of vibe coding if you already know how to code, because it's a matter of, I already know basically what I want this to look like. I can tell the computer, I know how the syntax goes, I know how the computer's going to think. So when I tell Claude or ChatGPT or what have you, I want to do this using VBA, I have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like already. I just might not know one particular functionality or another.
Pretty well documented that you don't know how to code already by coding is.
That sounds about right. So I haven't seen the documentation, but I'm unsurprised to learn that documentation exists.
Huge time saver.
Oh yeah. No, and certainly my coding efficiency has increased since I started vibe coding. So, yeah. Oh yeah. Similar principles. I confess I don't know Power Automate as well. We do have so one of the people at our library uses Power Automate to populate to get our out of office calendar from Outlook to a daily Teams calendar, which is a really useful little feature. Yeah. Basically, from what I can gather, Power Automate does a subset of what VBA can do, and it does it more efficiently because but because it can only do that, if that makes sense. Yep. So I do not know any. I mean, the thing I would suggest is the thing that I suggest for basically any coding language. Start with your use case. Learn how, figure out something that you want to do. Whether for that build a grading spreadsheet. Figure out a way of doing it in VBA. One of the things that I learned about the sort of starting exercise, which my first instructor had me do. I didn't think to download it, but basically I had a grid of 10 cells, colored one of them red, and he told me, write a script to find the red dot, channeling my inner cat. Thank you for the appreciative chuckle there. But again, because what that does is it gets you sort of familiar with how the for syntax and the if syntax works with VBA. I would say I wish I could tell you I have a good resource. As I said, I would say start with a use case. Figure out what it is you'd like to do with it, and try and reverse engineer it from there. Yep. I am. I mean, once again, Melissa did a lot of damage to the reputation. And again, I hold that it's the same problems we have now, right? Like, you know, the people who fell victim to Melissa opened a Word document that had a list of passwords to adult websites that some guy put up on AOL. I imagine that there are probably there's probably similar things with like logins to OnlyFans or whatever now that would probably fool people as well. But again, I think that sort of residual memory has meant that Microsoft has kind of deprioritized it. I will say it's one thing I've played around a little with Copilot and never found Copilot to be nearly as satisfying as VBA, but I think that's where the development priorities have been. But yeah, the VBA interface has not changed since I started using it in 2011. So, all right. We're a little early. I'm sure you're all absolutely devastated to have some free time. Other questions, comments, concerns? Anyone want a copy of that grading spreadsheet? All right, thanks everyone.